Okay, my name is Steven Hartman, and I'm going to talk to you about the Bridges Coalition. I'm sorry I can't be there today in Belo Horizonte. I've been ill, just got out of the hospital. I'm a little weak still, so I'm sorry if I have a hard time being heard. I'll do my best though. I'm only going to cover the basics of what I would have covered in a fuller talk with you there. I'm glad at least I can share these details with you. So I'm here to talk about Bridges. Bridges is an initiative bringing together many different partners to work together on local, regional, and national collaborative efforts to support the Sustainable Development Goals and the UN's Agenda 2030. The initiative is about knowledge building and capacity building for sustainability, bringing together science, education, training, practice, and action. And the scope and reach of this has a focus on both local and wider contexts, connecting with diverse communities and stakeholders, not only academic actors, and with a focus on various scales of engagement and impact. So one big focus is a local and territorial focus of Bridges. However, we're trying to approach how we can take the lessons that we learn in different localities and bring them and connect them up regionally and globally with other partners who are trying to come to terms with similar challenges in their own regions. The range of stakeholders that we're addressing is wide as well. We are trying to bring in communities of knowledge, purpose, and action that go certainly across the spectrum of knowledge domains within the academic sphere, but that also go beyond the academic sphere and connect up with local stakeholders, with indigenous knowledge systems, and with a variety of other stakeholders and partners to more successfully create a coalescence of knowledge that can be implemented or moved upon, mobilized to help us come to terms more successfully with the sustainability challenges that we're dealing with today, which are considerable. There are site-specific and distant aspects of this work. There are analog and digital, qualitative and quantitative methods and orientations. Theoretical work has its place, but so too obviously does practical work. And we are value neutral in the Bridges Coalition when it comes to what approach is the best approach for a given challenge. That has to be determined on the basis of what that challenge is, and in conversation among a group of stakeholders that come together in an integrated fashion to try to come to terms with and find solutions to a number of problems and challenges that are being faced around the world right now. Okay, sorry about that. The humanities and the arts are very important to this. They've often been sidelined or not been involved enough in environmental work. And a lot has changed in the last 10 or 15 years with the advent of the environmental humanities, with a very rich body of work that's been going on out there, bringing historians, archaeologists, anthropologists, literary scholars, language scholars, philosophers, art historians. I could go on and on into work together that has a focus on environment and environmental sustainability. We really are trying to put, especially humanities, at the center of this process, privileging the humanities in one sense because it has been so sidelined, but also because we need to find ways to integrate this very important resource as a community of specialists into work that other specialists are doing with a focus on sustainability, because we're only going to solve the challenges that we have in front of us by working together more effectively. And there's a lot more we can do. So integration is key. So too is connecting up knowledge and knowledge production with directed action that builds upon that knowledge. So from here, I'll introduce Bridges as an initiative. Bridges has come together as a result of a number of different actors, and the lead actors in this process have been UNESCO, especially the Management of Social Transformations program, and the International Council of Philosophy and Human Sciences, and the Humanities for the Environment Global Observatory Network. These three partners came together in the last 2 years, have been in dialogue with one another, but over the past year have hosted a series of workshops bringing together a much wider array of partners, both organizational partners and institutional partners and NGOs and a wide variety of other stakeholders into this process to try to create something new that doesn't currently exist and that really needs to exist. And that's why the establishment process has been all about how can we build knowledge, how can we build new capacities for sustainability by successfully connecting up science, education, training, practice, and action for sustainability. How can we bridge research, education, and public engagement, bridge different knowledge domains and sectors, and connect diverse stakeholders to enable transformative action for global change. The different communities that we're targeting for or rather inviting into a dialogue with us about how we can change how we go about doing sustainability include not only academic actors, but they do also include academic actors that are sometimes not at the center of this kind of work, the arts and the humanities, certainly. But it also has sort of applied sciences and basic sciences involved. And of course, we're interested very, very much in what we can learn from and how we can work together to achieve new social innovations in knowledge production with local and indigenous communities, how we can learn from these partners, how those partners can learn from us, and how altogether we can learn from one another and be able to come to better terms with the challenges facing us. I won't read these verbatim, but I'll flash these up here for a moment, a sense of what some of the aims are that we've identified in the Bridges establishment process, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that process before this presentation is over. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to develop effective approaches to social environmental challenges, threats, and opportunities. Whether these are innovative, and the innovation may come just from bringing together different traditions and different domains that haven't been working together so much, or whether these are neglected local and traditional knowledge sources that we haven't paid enough attention to and we really need to be paying more attention to. The idea is to enable meaningful action for transformative sustainability change. So Bridges is an international coalition. I mentioned before that the founding partners are CIPSH, UNESCO, and the MOST program, Management of Social Transformations, is really taking the lead for UNESCO, but there are other sectors of UNESCO that are represented in this work as well, and the Humanities for the Environment Global Observatory Network. Here are some of the other partners that have taken part during and I'm going to put them up. I'm not going to read them out, but I'll let them go up there for a couple of seconds so that everybody can see who the other establishment partners are. And while I let them go up there a bit at a time, I'll tell you a little bit about what this process has been like. In 2017, the project broadening the application of the sustainability science approach finished after 2 years. And that project organized 3 workshops over a 2-year period internationally in Paris and in Kuala Lumpur, bringing together all of the UNESCO. It was a UNESCO-driven project, brought together all of the UNESCO regions and experts from the different regions on sustainability to discuss how sustainability science could more effectively support the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030, and what needed to be done to help sustainability science really achieve its full potential. And I was part of that process. My counterparts in UNESCO and in CIPSH were also part of that project. And after that project ended, one of the major outcomes of that project was a document called Guidelines for Sustainability Science and Research and Education, which was a set of recommendations to UNESCO member nations on how sustainability science could be supported, what sustainability science was exactly, and what it could be in terms of a redefined sense of what was possible through sustainability science. And our project, the Bridges Initiative, takes off where that project left off. And I'll tell you what makes the Bridges project different from that in just a moment. I want to just give you a quick sense, however, about the Humanities for the Environment global network that I represent, because it's probably the one partner here that's less well known than UNESCO and CIPSH, certainly, at this particular conference. We have 8 observatories: an Australia Pacific Observatory based at Sydney Environment Institute in Australia, a European observatory based at Trinity College Dublin. These observatories, however, are not just local. They tie together observer networks throughout the region that they represent. We have a Latin American observatory with its hub in Colombia. We have a North American observatory based at Arizona State University. We have an African observatory based at the University of Pretoria. Each of these observatories, by the way, supports a range of projects, and these projects are very, very much in keeping with the integrated approach to sustainability science that is foregrounded and promoted by the Emerging Bridges Coalition. We have 2 Asian observatories, an East Asia Observatory and an Asia Pacific Observatory based in Taiwan. And finally, we have the latest, the newest observatory, a couple years old, is the Circumpolar Observatory, based at the Stephenson Arctic Institute in Iceland, and that's the observatory group that I lead. I was going to tell you a little bit more about that, but if I'd been there in person, I would have, but I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible and not get into all of that right now, because I think it's important that I leave as much time for Patrick and Erica and Louise to follow through on other aspects of what's been going on in Bridges, where it comes from, and where it's going from here. What I will say, however, is that the Bridges Coalition is based, and I just mentioned to you that guidelines document. This was the major output of the broadening the application of the Sustainability Science Approach project that ran for 2 years. These guidelines were produced at the end of 2017. I think they were launched in early 2018 at a UNESCO event. After that, we began to discuss a number of people who had been involved in the first project, how we could move on from there and try to successfully live up to these guidelines, how we could operationalize these guidelines, not keep them at the realm of abstraction, but in fact, find a way to demonstrate these guidelines in practice. So UNESCO, on one hand, is working with the different UNESCO commissions nationally in the different member nations to try to promote the principles that are outlined in these sustainability science guidelines. What Bridges is about putting legs underneath these abstract guidelines and realizing them in situ in a variety of localities and territories. So I won't read these outlined either, but what I will say is that there's the project once again, and this is what it attempted to do and what I think it did do very well. These were the different sort of leading um, uh, offices that were involved in driving the project at UNESCO. And the guidelines themselves, I won't read this verbatim either, sketch out, I'll let them each sit up here for a few seconds each, sketch out how sustainability science should be carried out, ideally, to more successfully be able to meet the challenges that we're facing right now and support in a meaningful way Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. It sketches out principles of sustainability science, which are among the foundational principles of the Bridges Coalition as well. I'll go to those in just a second and sketch and allow you to see the 6 principles that are in that guidelines document. We have our own 5 additional principles within the Bridges establishment process that we've managed to agree on that are part of our founding principles together with these 6 principles. Methodologies, diverse approaches to funding and governance, all of these are part of the Bridges challenge, what we're trying to do with Bridges, and how we are actually connecting up knowledge coming out of the academic sphere with knowledge that exists in other niches, and how together these can be mobilized, this knowledge can be mobilized more successfully, bringing attention to decision makers and policymakers, and identifying solutions and possible pathways based upon applying this knowledge in wise ways to achieve a more sustainable planet, a more sustainable Earth. The document also discusses all the pages here, refer to pages in the guidelines document, which is downloadable from the UNESCO website. And the supporting of North-South and South-South cooperation on research and education is key as well to this initiative, as is a more agile approach towards governance and funding that allows us to create new capacities where we've needed capacities for a long time, but where they do not currently exist because of the difficulty involved in integrating a variety of different otherwise siloed up traditions and knowledge and approaches that are going on in different fields. So this is all about bringing those fields together. The rationale for Bridges was already provided in the guidelines document. In the guidelines document at the end, the drafters talk about finding a mechanism to facilitate the coordination of an implementation process of these guidelines, taking it beyond the abstraction of the guidelines and realizing it in practice. And this is essentially what Bridges is meant to do. Bridges now is picking up where the guidelines left off, trying to operationalize those guidelines, and in the process demonstrate the efficacy of this approach, which is an approach that is not common right now. An approach that places human-centered approaches at the center of new sustainability science work and places the humanities and the arts and other traditionally or historically marginalized knowledge domains, which are very rich and have a lot to offer. Historians, philosophers, archaeologists, anthropologists, literary scholars, language scholars, art historians, I could go on and on and on. Each of these fields has grown considerably with an environmental and a sustainability focus in recent years, in the past 10 to 15 years especially. And maybe the environmental humanities, the field that I represent, may be the biggest growth field within the humanities. And it is very proactively addressing environmental and sustainability challenges. And the good thinking, the good work, the empirical work, the theoretical work, the application within education and within society and outreach, this is all work that can materially aid the other sustainability science work that's been coming from the natural sciences and from engineering and from technical disciplines and from medicine. And I think we have to think much more aggressively about how we can join these different efforts together and find methodologies that allow us to achieve much more than we've been able to in the past. I'm going to end just by sketching out what the 6 sustainability science guidelines are, or principles are, that are mapped out in the guidelines document, focusing on, for instance, interdependent, complex, and mutually reinforcing character of different natural, social, and cultural sustainability challenges that are happening everywhere locally, but also around the planet. It's happening in so many different contexts. The impacts are certainly global, but they're realized in a variety of different ways in local contexts. And our work is really going to have this local focus, this focus on generating new projects, demonstration projects, testing out new approaches in integrated transdisciplinary approaches towards sustainability science, very human-centered, very humanity-centered, in a variety of different contexts. And then also focusing on how we can learn across the different nodes of the global coalition, one from the other, one group from the other, or different groups from different regions collaborating with one another on comparative projects, for instance. We're all about generating new knowledge, mobilizing that knowledge, disseminating it, and trying to implement that knowledge in different governance and action contexts, more successfully connecting up knowledge production with on-the-ground refinements and how we actually do sustainability and create sustainable outcomes. In addition to generating knowledge, it's focusing on, the sustainability science is focusing on solving problems, understanding dilemmas, understanding the inherent conflicts of goals and interests that sometimes are tied up in particular dilemmas, what sometimes get referred to as wicked problems, and how different new coherent policy agendas and policy options that are also better integrated need to target these really, really tricky kinds of problems so that we can find better solutions in the future. The time frame is very short right now. We've got a decade ahead of us to the end line of Agenda 2030. There's a lot that has to be accomplished right now. None of the member nations is on track with their own targets, really. If you consider them in terms of where they are and where they need to be by 2030, we're not nearly as far along as we need to be, and that's true around the globe. So we need to change business as usual and find new approaches to how we can actually more successfully change how we do things to and ratchet things up so that we're not constantly behind our own targets, because those targets are not arbitrary. They're there for a reason. And if we don't meet them, we're going to be in a lot more trouble than we are now. The cross-cutting nature of sustainability science is crucial. The humanities, the arts in particular, are very crucial to this process. And this is one thing that I think Bridges is unique in foregrounding as a global initiative, as an initiative that will be very tied to agenda, or tied to UNESCO rather. And we hope once the approvals process occurs, not just with all of the establishment partners that need to sign off on what we've agreed on as far as the guiding principles of Bridges, but of course with the UNESCO Management of Social Transformations program, where we see Bridges being embedded, being anchored within the UNESCO MOST program, but with an autonomous international secretariat that we're also working on establishing independently this year that will work very, very closely with the MOST program officials at UNESCO. And anyway, so there are all of the different, I won't read that verbatim, but what I would like to do, I think, is to emphasize how these principles correspond to a set of Bridges principles that was one of the outcomes of our establishment process this year. And there are 5 additional principles that we've identified as being crucial to the emerging coalition. 1, we are humanity-centered, but not limited to the humanities. We value contextualized approaches, diversity, contradiction, or rather, this is an older document. It's not actually contradiction anymore. That was corrected. But essentially, we value contextualized approaches, diversity, and robust understandings of sustainability challenges that sometimes may seem to be contradictory. That's what that should say, and I think that's what it says in the revised form. I unfortunately got hold of an older document when I uploaded the screen grab of this document. The next principle, we understand the Earth not solely as a planetary system, nor as a reservoir of resources, but as a web of meanings and interactions that's inherently multi-layered and pluralistic. 3, we're committed to a critical understanding of sustainability that emphasizes the diversity of its subjects, objects, and timelines. 4, we will work to establish a world of new relationships based on dialogue and co-design among the co-inhabitants of the Earth, both human and non-human. And we are committed to an ethical approach to resource mobilization and use. So there's more, and we have a 2-page document that we put out. As part of the establishment process, I'm going to have to end here, but I just want to mention that as part of the establishment process for bridges, we have articulated not only this set of principles, but a number of working groups have articulated various challenges and goals for coming to terms with those challenges that will be part of the operationalization of the sustainability science guidelines as we begin to put it together and try to realize it within the Bridges Coalition. In addition to that, I would say that we would, I'm just going to turn that off. In addition to that, I would just say that these will be communicated to a range of actors. We're expecting new partners to come on board. Actually, I'm not sure, now that I think about it, I shared all of those with you. No, I did share the different establishment partners. And we expect new partners to be coming on board. We expect most, if not all of those establishment partners that were part of the dialogue over 3 workshops that we had in 2019 in Belo, Portugal in March, at UNESCO headquarters in June, and here in Sweden at the Sigtuna Foundation in October this year. And based upon the consensus that was achieved over these 3 workshops, we have articulated a vision, and we're going to be putting that in motion this coming year. We've identified processes for endorsing new projects and promoting them, as well as finding ways of trying to promote funding strategies to aid projects that can be implemented on the ground, from which we can all learn that work from these principles. And we're going to be working together with all of the community, the emerging community within the Bridges Coalition, to try to achieve these kinds of goals. And we're trying to stimulate new projects, and we've also identified projects that are already running that really meet all of the criteria that bridges are all about, so that we can better communicate to a wider audience or group of actors how innovative, game-changing work is taking place, and how we can look to these models as examples of new work that we might want to approach in trying to achieve sustainability. I guess that's all I have time for right now. We will be setting in motion, we'll be communicating. We already have a website up. It's www.bifrostonline.org. And there you can find a lot of information about the Bridges process. www.bifrost, B-I-F-R-O-S-T, online.org. Check that out. There's a lot more information about Bridges on there, and we'll be coming with much more information in the year to come. Thank you.